Did you know that yesterday's hands-off protests were peaceful, not because black people didn't show up, but because white people did? Hello, I'm Earl from CBU, Crackers Being Useful, and I want to get into this. I've been seeing some stuff about how peaceful the protests were yesterday, and people are correlating that with the fact that most black people stayed at home. If anything, this proves how aggressive the police are with black protesters. It has nothing to do with the protesters that didn't show up. It has everything to do with the protesters that did show up. It was peaceful because white people are treated differently by the police than black people. And another thing I want to add right here at the end is I'm seeing a lot of stuff from white folks talking about how we got to do something because they were raised white trash, they were raised poor, so on and so forth. I want you to stop for a second. If you've been telling yourself this, if you've been telling yourself that you know the black experience because you are white trash or raised poor, I need you to stop equating poverty with black people. Please. Y'all have a good day.
Ladies and gentlemen, gather round, get comfortable, grab your popcorn, because we're about to dig deep into the wildest plot twist of the century. First things first, a huge welcome to all our new and old subscribers. You all are the lifeblood of this channel. And let me take a second to give a special shout out to Eb Bryant, our 1,000 subscriber. That's right, Eb Bryant. Your name is now etched in Echo Room Vibes history forever. Now, let's get into the madness that has been breaking the internet. Apparently, the recent protests were peaceful because black people weren't there. Yes, you heard that right. The streets were calm, the signs were neatly aligned, the chants were within the recommended decibel range, and not a single target was on fire. And why? Well, some folks are boldly claiming it's because black folks decided to stay home. But hold on now. Was it really because black folks were absent? Or was it something else? Let's unpack this, Echo Room family. So let's quickly dive into the rest of the video and we'll be back for more commentary.
Why is there no coverage of the protests that took place on April 5th? There were protests that were taking place in all 50 states of the United States of America. All 50 states. Yet there was no coverage. We saw people going live. They were on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, TikTok Live, showing that the protests were happening. They indeed were happening. But why is there no media coverage on those protests? In the lives that I was seeing, that I was streaming, I saw that there were a lot of people out there. And surprise, surprise, there were a lot of white people and a lot of vets. Right? And not only was I paying attention to who was in the crowd, I was paying attention to the police officers, to law enforcement, where they were, what they were doing, how did they look, how they were behaving, because I've witnessed, I've been a part of several protests, especially during the Black Lives Matter, and I know what law enforcement was looking like when it was you understand, those type of protests back in 2020. So I was looking out in the videos, in the streams, looking to spot law enforcement, to see the barricades, to see law enforcement in fucking bulletproof vests with K9 dogs and batons and forcing and huddling everybody in one corner. I was looking out for that. But I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I didn't see any of the treatment that would have been out there, that we would have seen had a lot of black people been out there protesting alongside those white people and those veterans. And that leads me into my next point. The reason why there was no media coverage showing all of these protests that were happening simultaneously in all 50 states was because it would have to showcase that it was all white people, old people, veterans that were fighting, literally saying that Trump is ruining this country. See, they're not going to listen to me and you, black, brown, you understand, when we say that Trump is literally ruining this country. This administration is going to ruin this country. But if they see Mima and Papa, you understand, they see their grandma, they see their veterans, their vets, their uncles, grandfathers, whoever, out there literally saying, I am a recovered MAGA supporter. Please do not support MAGA. If they were to see that in all 50 states, white people would have to think more. They would have to think more and open up their minds and get woke, the very thing that they don't want them to do. But y'all do know for a fact that if it was black people that was out there alongside with them, that's the crazy thing about it. Even if they were there, like some of them were there as allies during the Black Lives Matter protests, even if they were there, as soon as we were alongside them, best believe law enforcement would have been out there in full force. They would have been out there in full force. And best believe sometime during this week, we would have gotten some announcement of martial law being enacted. I just wanted to put that out there. So for all the people who is like, why weren't black people protesting? It was out of safety. And it's because we knew if we wasn't there, that it would actually be a peaceful protest. And it's not even to say that they were peaceful. If you were listening to some of the shit that these people were saying, they was rowdy, okay? But they still was met with respect. The type of respect that black people would have never been given. We've never been given that opportunity. We've never been given that privilege. And this is why we as black people have to figure out another way to boycott and another way to protest. Because going out there in the streets is literally a death wish.
So you're hearing that the hands-off April 5th protests yesterday were so peaceful and everything was great and there was like no violence, no escalation, and that it was also predominantly white people, predominantly white women. Here's the thing. Here's the really important point. It is not that the people who were in attendance yesterday, right, the predominantly white people, the predominantly white women, are inherently more peaceful and law-abiding, and they just know how to do it, right? That's not the reality, okay? It is because they were met with a different level of force, being none, like a lack thereof, as opposed to when movements are predominantly about and backed up by people of color, right? Queer people, especially black people, especially black women. They are met with a different level of force, not only by police, but by like random conservative militia groups that were showing up every single day at the BLM protests.
Yesterday was one of the largest collective organizing efforts in American history. Millions of people, and I'm talking millions. Some estimates are saying upwards of 5 million people showed up to 1,800 different protests yesterday in all 50 states and some U.S. territories to say, hands off our democracy. What I find very interesting about yesterday, though, is the utter lack of police presence. These protests were largely made up of Caucasian women. That was the main demographic in almost every single demonstration. And the cops stayed home. There were not clouds of tear gas. There weren't rubber bullets flying everywhere. And what I mean when I point that out is the fact that white women need to step it up. We have been riding on the shoulders of BIPOC people, specifically black women, to progress our society forward for far too long. And I'm so glad yesterday went the way it did, But we need to keep this momentum going and keep showing up to these events. The complete lack of police presence yesterday was not an accident. It was not an accident. That is what happens when white people decide to collectively organize. That is what happens when you weaponize your white privilege in order to push our society forward for all people. If you did show up to one of the protests yesterday, hell yeah. And I'm so proud of everybody. If you didn't, make plans, babes. There's more coming. Make plans, get a protest buddy, and get your signs ready because we have to keep this momentum going.
If you're wondering what Black people were doing on April the 5th during the protests, this is what. Both videos were recorded within 15 minutes of each other.
You see the song? You see?
Oh, that's from the protest. Wait a minute. Listen, I'm not mad at this at all. I'm really not. Black folks chilling right now. I love to see it. We are unbothered. We are blessed, highly favored.
Welcome back to the channel. So let's get the facts straight. Black Americans, by and large, sat this one out. Why? Well, a little thing called historical memory. After decades, centuries of protesting against police brutality, voter suppression, and racial injustice, Black folks have noticed a pattern. Whenever they hit the streets, it's a all military-grade response. You got riot gear, flashbangs, mounted police on horses, looking like a scene from the Gladiator movie. And don't forget the tear gas, because apparently a peaceful march requires a chemical warfare response. But this time, Black folks said, nah, we good. Instead, many Black people chose to dance in the street, literally. Choreographed TikToks, some casual electric slides, and an overall joyful display of non-participation. Others, they kicked back at home with Netflix, sipped a tea, and watched the chaos unfold like a premium reality show, Love and Protest, the season finale. And the best part, some even speculated that this entire protest was a trap to set up martial law. Now, let's talk about who did show up. The protesters were white women. Now, here's where the real twist comes in. The protests were predominantly white women. Yes, the Karen Collective stepped out in full force, armed with a well-practiced, soft-spoken outrage and hand-drawn signs featuring elegantly curated Canva fonts. And the response from law enforcement? Gentle de-escalation techniques, sympathetic negotiations, police forming a protective line for protester safety. Let's be real. If the demographics of the protest had been different, Would the authorities have handled it the same way? That's the billion-dollar question. But wait, some folks are saying the protests were peaceful because the protesters were just naturally law-abiding. Oh, law-abiding? Because last time we checked, the January 6th crowd also protested, and it ended with people breaking windows, smearing feces on Capitol walls, and looting government offices. And let's not even bring up those anti-mask protests where folks literally stormed government buildings with rifles and screamed in officers' faces with zero consequences. But hey, maybe the rules are different depending on who is protesting. The great race switch experiment. So let's play a little thought experiment. Imagine if the same protest, same signs, same chants, same exact location, but replace the protesters with a majority black crowd. Would we still be hearing about how peaceful it was? Give me the answer. I can't say. We all know the headlines will have been different. Instead of peaceful demonstrators, we'll be hearing rioters take to the streets, chaos erupt in downtown, law enforcement forced to restore order. It's funny how the narrative shifts depending on who's holding the protest sign. All right, before we continue, let me take a second to appreciate everyone watching right now. You all have been showing massive love to the channel, and it does not go unnoticed. If you are still here, drop a fire emoji in the comments. Let's see who's really vibing with us. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss these satirical deep dives. Yeah, so guys, the power of silence. But in all honesty, the silence from Black Americans during this protest was powerful. Instead of engaging, they let the world see the contrast. No need to say, look at the double standard. The footage spoke for itself. And that's the real power of the FAFO season. Sometimes the best move is to do nothing at all. And yet, even in the absence, Black folks still became the topic of conversation. Now, that's influence. So, what do y'all think? Was this protest really peaceful because Black people weren't there? Or was it peaceful because the protesters were different? Sound off in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget, if you watched till the end, drop a fire emoji so I know you are part of the realest crew out here. Big love to everyone for rocking with Echo Room Vibes. Catch y'all in the next one.